everyone, and welcome to GovGeeks Assemble. Level up your 9 to 5 on 95. I'm Javier, and I'm really excited to welcome you guys today because there is a special guest that we have all the way from Texas. It was an amazing long distance phone call that we had. No, let me read a little bit about Shonda Mace's background and her bio. So she serves on the planning team with the Texas General Land Office's Community Development and Revitalization Program, otherwise known as GLO-CDR program. So prior to joining that team, Ms. Mace worked for 10 years as an architectural historian, spending much of her time working as a consultant for the Texas Department of Transportation, reviewing environmental documents and projects for compliance with NEPA Section 106 and 4F requirements. That's amazing stuff, Shonda.
It's a lot, and a lot of acronyms all in there that get me tongue-tied as well. So I've been doing this almost 5 years, about 4.5 years for the GLO, and I still get tongue-tied trying to say community development revitalization. So it's challenging. So yeah.
Well, yes. I should mention, thank you so much for being on the show, of course, but you are here in a personal capacity, not officially representing any government agency or organization.
Correct. Yeah. Just here to talk about all my time in various industries and government capacities and what I've learned and answer any questions.
That's amazing. Well, first off, honestly, thank you for your service. Just listening to the work that you've done here, you've really made a difference in people's lives.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we had the chance to connect. I was watching one of your panels recently at the Performance Institute's Government Performance Summit, and it was just really engaging. I think one of the sessions that you were on was about evidence-based innovation, and it was a great panel discussion. We had a couple of colleagues that were on there as well. In fact, Mark was so kind, he did our show as well. He joined us not too long ago. So just so much information that you guys had there. Can you tell us a little bit about the topics that you guys talked about?
Sure, actually, absolutely. It was really interesting. And I will say that was a different type of panel for me because it wasn't so much flood and disaster recovery related, more as just bringing in different aspects of government work and talking from different fields. So it was interesting to hear different perspectives. So I will say that we all had one common theme that we all agreed upon, which is trust. So I was here, I attended and spoke representing the state initiatives, and then we had Terry from federal, and then of course Mark from city. But we all agreed that you have to start, no matter what capacity you're working in, no matter what level of government you're working in, everything goes back to trust. Mostly when you're working with people and the public, and for me it's communities, you really have to develop that trust. And we were talking about how trust leads to, you have to have that trust to gather the data that you need, and data directly relates to evidence, another word for evidence. And then that leads to innovation. So for me, doing a planning study, the purpose of the planning study ultimately is innovation. How can we do something better? How can we mitigate? Again, I do work for long-term disaster recovery. And so just in short, and I'm going off on a slight tangent, but for anyone that's not aware, after a natural disaster, of course, FEMA goes in first. And then if it's a large enough disaster to rise to a level, a national level, then we get what's called a presidential disaster declaration. And that allows Congress to appropriate funding, which goes to HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Affairs. And HUD writes what's called a Federal Register, which basically outlines and provides rules for how that funding is going to be spent. It identifies which states will get the funding and which counties within the states and zip codes get the funding. And so, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so apologies. So for the state of Texas, the General Land Office, HUD actually does, well, a state agency is designated by the governor in every state to handle the HUD funding. And we act as we're kind of the pass through. So we are the ones that we write an action plan that discusses how that funding is going to be spent. And it's based off of the Federal Register. So again, that goes back to data and relationships with communities, because we are working in disaster impacted areas. And so right now our big push, everyone knows Hurricane Harvey. And so my team does planning studies to mitigate, right now we're doing a big flood study to mitigate effects of future flooding in Harvey impacted areas. So that was a big, whole large umbrella to answer one simple question. Hope that's okay.
No, that was fantastic. And you know, it's so interesting because when an emergency strikes and people, our citizens, need a good government response, there's people like yourself that know the process, have done the data analysis, and understand how best to use the resources that government has to really serve the needs. And it's interesting because we can like flip on the television and we see the disaster, and then all the response efforts happen, but we don't necessarily have a good understanding as a general population of all of the stuff that happens. I mean, and gosh, how many different agencies did you just describe and at different levels? And you're building trust with all of them to help serve the needs of the public.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, another challenge that we have, you kind of skirted around it, but one thing is to keep people engaged. Engagement is another big word for us, because a challenge that we are presented with working in the long-term disaster recovery, let me state that we usually don't even start working until about 18 months after disaster. Right. So, you know, there's a long timeline between the day the disaster hits and when we actually even start to talk about funding. And then it could be even a longer period of time before the funding actually hits. So engagement is really a big word for us, because everyone wants to help after disaster. Response is huge. Communities want to help each other and everything's wonderful. But the longer you get out from said disaster, people start to forget. Well, that was a couple of years ago. What you don't realize is there's still people in need out there. There's still so many. Harvey alone had, I think, about $120 billion in damage, right, which led to unmet needs. The numbers fluctuate between about 110 and 120 billion dollars in disaster, which, like I said, directly translates to unmet needs. In the sense that, you know, a lot of people might not have flood insurance or infrastructure is damaged and whatnot. So, yeah, it's a lot, but it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding work.
Well, gosh, I'd imagine so. Like if I'm thinking as an empathetic individual, an empathetic citizen, and I see others that are in need like this, and of course there's this outpouring of affection and support, but how do we help do that in a way that is most effective and efficient for them? And then all of a sudden, Shonda's here, has all of these connections, these relationships that have been established, has this insight, and is able to continue to serve the needs of the public for, you know, so many time after the initial incident even occurred. I'd be grateful to see you and welcome your support.
It's nice, yes, and I'm fortunate that I do serve. I wear multiple hats for CDR because, as you mentioned, my background's architectural history, and I am the only functioning architectural historian, qualified architectural historian on staff. So I get to still dabble, and I do architectural reviews for historic houses. Historic age houses, actually, meaning houses over 50 years old. So I never honestly realized until I started doing long-term disaster recovery, the impact on older homes. It's just something that never, even being in the industry for 10 years to the point that I started at GLO, it just never really, I never really thought about it before. It never really occurred to me. And then I started working here and just saw this really big niche about, oh, they need somebody to help review these houses. Otherwise they just get stuck in limbo for sometimes months at a time. And you know, the one thing about HUD funding is that the majority of it goes to low to moderate income families. We have to directly serve LMI communities and directly serve LMI families. And so when you are looking at people that probably might have not had flood insurance and they are an LMI family, and oftentimes, you know, a lot of these houses in LMI communities have been passed down through generations. And so the house itself is quite old. And so it's heartbreaking when you see houses like that stuck in limbo, meaning that they can't get cleared because they're over 50 years old and there's just too much back and forth. So I've been very fortunate since I've been here to take on that role and use my background and my qualifications to just help move things forward, help with reviews for rehabilitations, and help be a go-between between our agency and other government agencies that are involved in review of historic homes and historic age properties.
That's amazing. I mean, me not really understanding or knowing the background, the qualities, the necessities in all of this, and you having this unique insight and expertise. I mean, gosh, like how many nuanced issues are really involved in all of these situations? It's so complex.
It's very, very complex. And honestly, I mentioned I've been at the GLO for about 4.5 years, and I am still learning new things every day. I was very overwhelmed when I first started there, having no prior knowledge about disaster recovery, mostly long-term outside of your typical, oh, I know about FEMA and FEMA trailers, but I didn't know anything else. And I will say that it really does take a village in the sense that everybody that I've worked with, continue to work with, or people who've moved on to other agencies or other jobs have just been so wonderful and so helpful. And it really is just a big family of helping everybody through it and understanding that it takes time to learn things. And another thing is that you really have to be flexible. I ever since I've started, I over in my mind constantly am saying, blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape.
I love it.
You have to be flexible in our agency because things are always changing. What was rules? For instance, federal registers, I mentioned those, that they outline the basic rules that have to be followed for the funding after every disaster. Well, the Federal Register changes after every disaster. So you can't even expect a new Federal Register to look like the previous one with the same rules, because HUD changes things.
Right.
And so you have to be flexible to bend and to change, and laws change, and needs change, needs of the communities change, and things, you know, elected officials change. So the priorities change with the communities because of that. So you just really have to learn to be flexible. But that also helps because everybody understands, at least in my agency, that we're all learning together.
You know, it's neat to see how so many people who are dedicated public servants towards this bigger goal band together in a way that is meaningful and helpful. And I'm curious, just in terms of your approach to all of this, being flexible obviously is very important, but what happens in terms of like our own individual career growth as part of all of this process? What can you recommend for individuals that are interested in being a part of something like this?
I didn't know well, again, I didn't know anything about disaster recovery, but I also, I had some project management background through my TechStop work, but planning studies and environmental work and everything were really new to me. So it was just, and I was fortunate that I was brought on to help create this program. We had never had regional planning studies before. This was the first time doing it. Planning studies prior had always been run by the communities and just kind of one-offs here and there. So this was the first time that the state kept the money at the state level and regionalized them. So I would just say patience is probably the best thing for anybody that wants to follow in not necessarily my career path, but something that they aren't necessarily sure of or well-versed in, is patience and understanding with yourself. It's very exciting, but I don't know everything, and willingness to learn and be open. You know, we've kind of created the path as we go. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of what not to do. But
Those are always,
again,
it
just
sounds like there's a story or two in there.
there's always stories with everything. If we had, a couple hours, I could get into more. But no, I think that just basically really just, like I said, just patience with yourself and understanding, and just the realization that you don't have to know everything going into it. You just need to know something. You just have to be open and willing to learn. And again, you have to be flexible. I mean, we did so many different things in the beginning that just were swatted away by various people, be it, other departments or our legal. And it's just one of those, it's just part of the process. And as long as you're open and honest, then people are going to understand, and they're willing to work with you for the most part.
That's really cool, because with so many people that are willing to contribute, everyone's bringing their own expertise. And if there's
Yeah.
that degree of flexibility, there's enough partnership that's there as well.
Yeah. And I'll say, even back in my tech stock days, I was fresh out of grad school when I was thrown into that position. And I was private consultant, but I was an embedded contractor. So I was treated no differently than a tech stock employee. I just wasn't formally employed by them. But everybody was so wonderful and so nice. And I was scared to death. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was literally over there at the time, it was sink or swim. And so, but everybody was so nice. Like I said, all the government agencies I've worked with or worked at, everyone is just, we're all people. And we're all just trying to help each other out. And you just got to remember that. And you'll get overwhelmed, and that's okay. But just like I said, just be open and honest, and try and be patient, and just understand that you're going to make mistakes. Everybody does. You're human.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if it was maybe a factor of Texas hospitality and helping people get on with everything, or just in general. Because honestly, a lot of the times when we're speaking with individuals on the show, we're working with members or clients with the GovGeeks, public servants are just so willing to support one another. It just seems like this great community.
Yeah, it really, really is. And honestly, I mean, I haven't been at TechStot and probably it's been about 10 years now. And I'm still close friends with several of the people that I worked with. And, we go out and have dinner together, and we're all, we talk about each other's kids and whatnot. And so it really is a big community.
That's
Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah,
It,
nice.
it just sounds like it's a nice entry point into not just a career where you're going to go in there and make a lot of money and, have all these big aspirations and crush everyone on the way to the top, but really to have a place to do something really valuable and build a community of partnerships and friendships in a way that is really meaningful for your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really great. And also, not for myself necessarily, because I enjoy where I am and what I'm doing, but a lot of people even use it as a stepping stone in a way, because you make so many connections with each other, with different industries and vendors and communities. And no matter what capacity in a government organization you're working in, you're going to make those connections. So some people do end up leaving after a while and going to the private sector and just expanding their world even further, which is absolutely wonderful. But it's a really good place to get started with that, if that's something that you're interested in for the future.
That's pretty helpful.
It's always nice to have connections.
Of course. And I guess it's also what I hear you're saying is that when you make the decision and you're involved in this environment and this culture, it's not like you're there forever, or like when you're deciding to make a move or a transition, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to commit the next 30 years of my life to doing this one thing.
Yeah, totally up to you. And even within this an agency, there's always room for movement upwards or lateral moves. I know that in my agency right now, people will get tired of what they're doing, and they'll, instead of leaving the agency, they'll just find another department or another opening to do something a little bit different. So that's another wonderful thing about government work, is that I feel like it is easy to make lateral moves if you want to, and try something different, but while still, working as a public servant.
Well, I mean, if you like the culture, the organization, you've established the partnerships, and like you said earlier, this idea about starting with a level of trust. If all of that is established and learned, then I guess it is a little easier to kind of transition from one opportunity to the next one. And in fact, I'm curious because a lot what we've been talking about is like, well, an individual, like their perspective. What have you seen in terms of like an organization, like managers creating a good culture? How do they create an engaged culture?
They work really hard. For my current division, they work really, really hard to create a good culture. It varies. We have weekly team meetings, we have weekly division meetings. COVID was challenging, of course, because everyone was home for 2 years, but they constantly reaching out, making sure everyone's okay. At one point, they talked about doing some fun videos when it was time to return to the office to get people excited about going into the office. We do usually once a quarter, more or less, we'll do all hands meetings where we go in together, everybody at once into the office, and we get through updates and whatnot. But then we do fun team building exercises, and they usually bring in snacks for us. Like last in person when we had, they brought on like popcorn and stuff.
Nice.
And so, yeah, just fun. And then they usually let us go early. So, and then always really engaged, lots of open dialogue about, are you okay? What do you need? Just really involving people. 2 weeks ago, I guess it was the week before Memorial Weekend, one of the biggest conferences for our industry in the state is the Texas Department of Emergency Management Conference, TDEM conference, more acronyms. And so TDEM is the state response. So where we are state long-term recovery, they are the response, but they hold one of the biggest conferences in the state. And so our division sent something, it's in San Antonio every year. And so our division sent something like 20 people down to it. And Kaylin, who organizes the conferences and was organizing everything, one fun thing that she did was she was organizing the different vehicles to go down there for day trips and back. And she, people that were in each car, she assigned people to cars, and she made sure that no two people on the same team were in the same car.
Oh.
So you would have 5 or 6 people in a car that weren't on the same team so that you could get to know your coworkers, which was, I thought, a really interesting and fun thing to do. I mean, that's for me, when I've traveled to conferences and ridden in a car with coworkers who, aren't on my team, you just get to meet so many new people and find out, their backgrounds and kind of what they're doing. And the thing is that my division continues to grow because we continue to have more disasters in the state,
Right.
Unfortunately. But so we have a lot of new people. So it's just a really nice opportunity for everyone to get to know each other.
It's nice having that, again, that area where people feel connected with something, where it's not like you're just out on your own trying to do it all. It's just
absolutely
it's so endearing.
Yeah, we are definitely a big community for sure. And nobody is alone. We're very much encouraged to talk to each other. They provide loads and loads and loads of training for us. It's wonderful. And so it's definitely a family.
So for all of you out there in the GovGeekdom that's listening to this and watching it, I mean, just listen to like such connections that Shonda is describing. It's amazing. So if you're feeling about what to do next step in your career, whether or not to choose public service or how this is going to look for you, there's communities out there that are like this, doing really good work and enjoying their life as they do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love working with the people. I love working with my coworkers. I love working with the communities on the studies. It's just really wonderful to see, like you said, when you're actually making a difference. And for me, I'm very lucky. I get to make a difference with the planning studies and see those out. And I also get to make a difference with the historic preservation and the architecture and that review, and see the differences that I've gotten to make. And it's wonderful key handoffs for when people get either a new house or when their house is finished the rehabilitation, getting to watch those. I mean, that's another thing that just gets you really excited is that, we can't all travel to them because they're all over Texas. But they oftentimes, with the permission of the homeowners, will record them. And so they'll play them for us during our weekly huddle meetings. And it's just, the tears of joy and happiness and appreciation from the homeowners is something that's just absolutely incredible. And it just really lets you know why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Rather than, you wake up every morning and you're like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this work? Or how is it that I'm feeling good about, working with this organization that takes away from so many people? You have a chance to help people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very endearing. It's wonderful.
I am touched. I am excited. This is just wonderful. It's so cool to hear like all of this happening. I feel like all giddy.
I do too. It gets me excited to talk about it.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your time and attendance and all of your attention. Shonda, of course, again, sincerely, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the invite. I've really enjoyed today. I wish we had more time.
Right? It just goes by so quickly.
It does go by so quickly.
Everyone, thank you again. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care.
Thank you.